Hello everybody, my name is Shoelace and welcome back to another episode of Free-to-Play Reviews. This time we're going to be taking a look at Planetside 2, a massive online first-person shooter made by Daybreak Studios. This game used to be one of the most highly played free games on Steam, but has recently, over the years, fallen from grace. So let's take a closer dive into this and see if this game is still worth your time and money. Planetside 2 takes place on the planet of Aroxus, where three major factions vie for control of the planet's land and resources. Out of these three factions, you have the authoritative Terran Republic, you have the profit-minded and rebellious New Conglomerate, as well as the borderline cultic and somewhat crazy and alien-worshipping Vanu Sovereignty. So, out of these three factions, you are vying for control of the planet and its resources, trying to gather up as much support as you can. You are placed in the middle of this conflict, and you have to pick a side and go on large-scale battles ranging from like 120 people per side. So this game somewhat lends itself towards experienced players with the first-person shooter genre. They definitely require people to have a good amount of experience, and I would definitely not recommend this game to anybody who is casually playing it. So the game revolves around this conquest system for each continent in the game. There are 4 separate continents that you can go to, whether that be a snowy biome, a swamp-based biome, a plains and fields, as well as a desert. So there's a lot of variation between all of the locations in this game. In these continents you have dozens upon dozens of strongholds that you have to take over for your faction as you slowly conquest your way over the continent and try and gain a foothold within it. To do this, you're going to have to choose a class or a vehicle that suits your playstyle and the situation at hand. Out of all the classes in the game, you have the Infiltrator that uses cloaking, snipers, and hacking to destabilize the enemy back line. You have the Light Assault that uses a high mobility jetpack that he uses to flank nearby enemies. The Combat Medic who uses nanotech to heal and revive allies in combat. You have the Engineer who deploys ammo, repairs vehicles, as well as establishing defenses in the form of turrets. You have the Heavy Assault who uses a heavy nano shielding, as well as a large suppressive LMG and a rocket launcher to deal with enemy tanks. And you have a Max, which is a giant mech that you can use to kill things with. Now, this game really lends itself towards customization, so you can actually fixate on whatever one of these topics that I've mentioned and make that the primary focus of that class. For example, you can make an infiltrator that's all about staying invisible at all times, or you can make one more so about tracking and sniping enemy targets. I mean, a good example of this is my Light Assault character, which I've upgraded his jetpack so that it works more vertically than it normally would. So because I've equipped the Icarus jetpack, as it's called in game, I have a lot more vertical mobility because I like to get on top of things. I'm more along the lines of climbing up the mountains and the cliff sides in order to get to places. So that really lends itself towards my specific type of gameplay style. Speaking of highly customizable things, let's quickly talk about the vehicles that are in this game. So starting off, we have the Flash, which is a fast mobile ATV that is slightly flimsier than every other vehicle in the game, so it tends to get bullied around a bit, but it does have high mobility. Next we have the Harasser, which is a 4x4 car with a mounted gun on top. It is very fast, very mobile, very good for going across rugged terrain, and is definitely one of the best vehicles for a small squadron of friends. Next up we have the Sunderer, which is a 6-wheeled armored transport that is very slow moving with 2 mounted guns on top. It is definitely good for hauling large groups of soldiers, and one of its main functions is the ability to park itself and then deploy itself for a forward spawn beacon, which is really useful for taking down enemy bases. Next up is the Lightning, which is a 1-man tank, which is the smallest of all the tank variants in the game, but it is definitely one of the fastest. So you can use its high mobility and very powerful gun to your advantage. Next up we have the 3 variant classes for the main large tanks of them. So in the Terran Republic side of things, you have the Prowler, which is a very slow-moving and kind of bulkier tank, which definitely deals out a lot of damage. Each one of these large tanks seems to have a mounted gun on top, as you can see here, but all of these ones definitely have a few different variations from across factions. For example, the Vanguard on the New Conglomerate side of things is a little bit lighter, but a little bit more fast-moving. Then you have the Mag Rider of the Vanu Sovereignty, which is a hovercraft, which allows it to have more lateral movement, but does limit itself due to the fact that the main gun can't alter from the direction of the actual tank. Last of all, we have the ant, which is used for mining resources for the base building component of this game. I will not be covering that base building because I do not have the resources in order to try it. From my limited experience with it, all I can tell you is that I am not overly impressed with what they've done with this. I feel like the base building could be better implemented personally, but I have heard people having different opinions over the matter. I will not be covering it in this video. Next up, we have the sovereignty-based fighters. So in this case, we have the Mosquito for the Terran Republic, you have the Scythe for the Vandal Sovereignty, and you have the Reaver for the New Conglomerate. Now all of these kind of vary depending, but they're all basically the same thing. They're all fighters, they all are one-seaters, and they all have pretty high mobility. Although I hear that the Terran Republic is slightly more mobile, the New Conglomerate hits slightly harder, and the Vandal Sovereignty is very good at hovering and has a lot more, I guess, turn access. One major thing about this is that these are very flimsy vehicles, so it can go down pretty damn quick. Next up, we have the Valkyr, which is a transport-styled vehicle, which is used for dropping allied infantry into enemy territory, as well as allowing squad spawning, and just general used for getting infantry back into combat more quickly. So it definitely has an interesting build to it. It's also got an interesting design allowing infantry members to actually use the side, like you can obviously equip the front mounted gun, but you can also sit in the side windows and fire out with whatever guns that they have. So for example, if you have some heavy assaults, they can actually shoot rockets out of the side of these things, and etc. Another thing to note is that these things are equipped with drop pod technology, which allows you to fly up into the air and then just jump straight out of the cockpit without a care in the world, and you will drop to safety even though it clearly looks like you're not going to. So, you know, interesting concept with this plane. And after that, you have the Liberator, which is a bomber-styled plane with a main gun in the front, a tail gun that you can use to fire off tailing enemies, as well as a belly gun, which is used for bombing the hell out of whoever is beneath you. So this is definitely one of the more attack-based choppers used for taking down either enemy vehicles or enemy infantry, whatever you categorize this thing to be specialized at. This is definitely meant for dealing a ton of damage. So as you can see very clearly on the belly of this vehicle. Next up, we have the gargantuan plane itself, the Galaxy, which is for some reason so special that it gets its own terminal for no reason, which I find really weird. Really strange choice for the developers, but hey, I'm not going to judge. This thing is a Hulk. It is a massive, slow-moving plane that carries 12 people at a time, and it is just a beast. This thing is huge. You will see this coming from a mile away. Now, although this thing is really cool and very interesting, if you want to kamikaze into the middle of an enemy territory and see if you can disrupt them or anything like that, this plane I don't see having very much functionality as opposed to any of the other planes. This thing is pretty huge in size, but I don't see very much of a point to it. I would recommend possibly adding a carryable vehicle functionality so that you can transport tanks and stuff into the air, although that might disrupt balance in the game. So, you know, just a suggestion. I'm not really sure over how useful this plane is, but some people make it work. Alright, let's quickly look at the graphics settings of this game. So, as you can see, there are a ton of options available for this. In the general settings, we have a bunch of toggle settings allowing you to toggle zoom and sprint, as well as setting it into the sprint legacy mode. I'm not exactly sure what this is supposed to do. They don't really exactly have a very clear description of what it's supposed to do, but regardless, I'm kind of glad it's there. I'm not really sure over how useful it is, considering the description is just saying it's the previous sprint version. The rest of the things are very good though. You have a vertical look, a bunch of different settings, bars, sliders, so you can very fine-tune exactly how you want this to look, as well as making it so that it uses the raw input from your mouse, which is like a really cool thing that they added to this. It also has a bunch of options to allow the reduction of input lag, so it's really pushing its very hardcore FPS fan base, so that's kind of nice. In the interface section, you have a bunch of options towards changing the HUD, making it localized, centraling the actual main HUD, as well as changing the way that players and different icons appear on your screen, so the different factions will appear in different ways. I think by default, all of these things are just set so that they're the color of the things. So for this example, I switched this to green, and for some reason, I want this to be white, and this can be black. So now every single time I see a Vanu Sovereignty person, they will appear black for their heads-up display, and every single time I see an ally, they will appear green, which is going to be confusing because I believe green is already inputted towards what groups are looking like. Anyways, so obviously there are the different centralized versions that they have available, this vertical bar style thing, as well as the ones that are just in the corner. So there's a lot of variation between what you can have for your heads-up display. Next up, we have the graphical settings. There are a ton of options here, so obviously you can scale up the field of view so that this feels more like a Doom game than anything else, which is kind of nice, especially for this game, as well as increasing the rendering distance so that you can look really far away, which is useful for anybody who's playing as an infiltrator and focusing on the sniper branch of this game. This game is very graphic heavy, so there's a lot of options available towards changing things exactly the way you want them, but I will tell you, if you have everything set to the max, this game is going to look pretty freaking beautiful, which is pretty awesome. Anyways, let's take a further look into the audio options of this. So let me just, well, obviously there's the wide view angle, which is good for lower res monitors, I believe. I'm not really sure on how that affects anything. Anyways, audio settings pretty standard. Not able to access that from the main menu, which is a bit of an issue for me. In voices, this is just a standard voice option settings so that you could switch how much static you're getting in and out. And the key bindings is definitely one of my favorite portions of this game because you really get to customize exactly how you're going to play this game. So every single action can be custom bound, as well as being able to alternate in between using a mouse and keyboard as well as a joystick. And in addition, in the option settings, they have all the credits, so pay your respects to the creators and whatnot. Anyways, that is all for the graphical settings. The grind in this game is pretty mediocre. It's not too good or too bad. It's really dependent on what you're trying to get. For example, if you're trying to customize, for example, the infiltrator and trying to get the best stealthy character that you can, then it will take a moderate amount of time. It's not going to take too long in order to be able to do that. Maybe a solid week of play and you will be able to get there. Unfortunately, if you want to focus on vehicle combat, then you're going to be here for the next millennia or so, because some of these unlocks take a ridiculous amount of time. Weapons cost around 1,000 credits a piece, and getting 100 credits usually equals to about an hour's worth of gameplay if you're doing well. See, it's all dependent on whether or not you get kills and objectives, so if your team is losing currently, then it's likely that you're not going to earn that many credits, which can lead to a stagnation in progress, which is really, really bad for this game. The in-game currency for this game is pretty interesting because it is based off of the Daybreak cash system, which extends to the different properties that Daybreak Studios also owns. For example, DC Universe Online will also have the same amount of currency that you have here in Planetside, which is pretty interesting. So you get around $500 per $5. So it's about a $1 to 100 credits for this game, and to be perfectly honest, that isn't exactly a great deal when it comes to purchasing weapons in this. Weapons average around 1,000 credits, and in order to, so you would need at least $10 in order to purchase one singular weapon, which seems a bit extreme to me. I would personally appreciate it if they reduce some of these costs for weapons, and making some of them barred behind a paid wall. For example, getting the golden version for a lot of the NS variant weapons. I find that to be a little bit cheap just to get a weird skinned version of it, even though there are already skins in this game. It's really confusing. I guess it's just for the gold plating or whatever. But I don't know. Something about the store always rubs me the wrong way, and all the customization is locked behind getting Daybreak Cash, which is kind of okay, I guess, but I mean, there's no way of getting those cosmetics on your own, which is kind of irritating. And considering how many customizations there are and how like varying they are, you would appreciate it if there was at least more than just one option at the very beginning. Also, this new construction update that they've added is very heavily impacted by the Daybreak Studio. Like otherwise, every single piece is going to be extremely expensive, and yeah, I'm not a big fan of the store in this game, to be perfectly honest. I wish that they formatted this different. I wish that they made Daybreak actually worth a little bit more. In addition to that, there's also the members early access system, which basically allows you to invest money and earn a membership in the game, and you'll have access to custom things. So you'll have access to like the gold rims on a harasser or some fancy beta laser trimming that you can beta test for them in the meantime. And membership gives you around 1,000 credits per month, which is kind of average. It just means you get to have one gun, and considering that some guns are costing around 2,000 credits, it's just not that great of a deal, to be perfectly honest, and I would suggest putting your money somewhere else. One thing that I can easily say about this community is that it is definitely not toxic, but that is kind of due to the fact of the sheer design of this game implores it to not be very toxic. I haven't received any negative comments from any of my teammates, mostly due to the fact that there are thousands of us on at a time. This battle currently that I am in the gameplay that you see right now, there are 100 people surrounding me, both on the enemy and the allied team. So I am surrounded by groups of people. So it's very difficult for people to get angry at you from your team just because you're performing badly, all things considered. The only bad thing that you could do to entice someone to get mad at you is to team kill them, which is unlikely because I'm assuming everybody wants to just have fun and try and do the best that they can in this game. So it's really, it's pretty nice. It's a very relaxing experience, minus the fact that you're going to be dying over and over again, as I mentioned in the gameplay section. Yeah, the sheer mass of characters that are playing on the battlefield really lend itself to implore you to not get mad at your teammates, because it's unreliable whether or not your teammates are performing badly or not, because it's mostly a numbers game when it comes to this game. When it comes to my final thoughts on Planetside 2, only two things stick in my mind: that this game fluctuates very, very consistently from being incredibly fun to incredibly frustrating, simply based on the amount of players that you have on your team at a time. When it comes to my 4 rating system, whether or not to pass it, try it, play it, or pay it, I would recommend that you just try it. See how it feels for you. It's definitely not made for every single player out there, and it's definitely meant for the elites when it comes to first-person shooters, because these guys are absolutely insane. This game really pushes the fact that you are an insignificant cog in this war machine, and that may suit some players and it may not suit others. So, as always, I have been Shoelace. I hope that you liked this video, and as always, leave a comment down below and suggest other video games for me to try on this free-to-play series. Anyways, I have been Shoelace, and as always, have an excellent day.